Hello, this is the third video in the Anthony Lauder or Fluent Czech spiral method of language learning. Now, I really want to emphasize here that I'm not setting myself up to be any kind of expert, and there are plenty of people who are much more knowledgeable than me. All I'm trying to do here is describe techniques that I use and that have worked for me. Nothing more than that. And I've received many questions from the first two videos. I've been quite surprised with how many people seem to have been interested. And they've sent me lots and lots of questions, both on the videos themselves and in a language forum I belong to, and as emails and as private messages. And there's a lot of similarity in the questions, which make me wonder perhaps other people may be interested in the answers. So rather than answer each person individually, I've asked them to wait until I make this video response, and hopefully this will answer most of the questions. If I haven't answered your questions here, I apologise. I hope to get to them soon. So here is the Q&A session. So one question is, would I recommend using this approach from day one? And my answer is, it's entirely up to you. If you have watched the first two videos, and I recommend, by the way, that everybody watches those two videos before continuing with this video, otherwise it won't make much sense. So assuming you've watched the first two videos, I hope you've seen that the method is driven by curiosity. Now, when you're first learning a language, if you find yourself overwhelmed with curiosity, then maybe this technique's going to just make your brain explode or something like that. I don't know. Or maybe you find all of your curiosity is fulfilled by the textbooks that you're reading. For example, when I started learning Mandarin, the source materials that I had were so interesting that all of my curiosity was fulfilled just by reading some books and listening to some audio that I had. Whereas when I was learning Esperanto, even from the first day I thought, okay, I get what that concept's about, but now I've got lots of questions I want to play with. And so even on day one, I was using the spiral method. So there are no hard and fast rules that I follow. I let curiosity drive me. Yeah. So now this is a good question. Is this the whole of my routine? Is this all I do? And my answer is absolutely not. I call it just the core of my routine. It's sort of the stable part that I really see as in the center, that I use all the time. But around it, I'm doing everything you can imagine. For example, I listen to the radio, I listen to songs, I read books, I talk to people. Just use the language in the way that other people would. I even occasionally now read textbooks. Less so than in the past. I even occasionally read grammar books, less so than in the past. Now I tend to view those things as reference materials for me to jump into when my curiosity drives me. But certainly, this is not the only thing I do. What I do is look at other things, read newspapers, read books, talk to people, and whenever my mind goes, ooh, now that's curious, I remember it, or I even jot it down. I have a little black book I write these things in. And then those curiosities set seeds in my head that I later explore through the spiral method. So the spiral method is nothing more than following up the aha moments, the curiosities, the ooh, I wonder what that's about, that arise from other materials. Yeah? Okay. So hopefully that answers that what is my daily routine? I don't actually have a daily routine. I do whatever I'm in the mood for, or whatever opportunity arises that day. So if I'm going to be meeting somebody and I speak with them in a language, fine, I'll do that. Or if I get a newspaper, I'll read the newspaper. Whatever comes up. Or in bed, I'm currently reading a joke book. But at another time I was reading an adventure story. So there is no daily routine. But what I do every single day is note down the curious things that have arisen during that day and I then follow the spiral method at least once a day through a full cycle. And I'll get to that part in a moment. And the other thing that I do is that every single day, for at least an hour, I listen to recordings. Now, those recordings could be recordings from my own spiral method or recordings from anything, but I'm very keen to make sure that I have a lot of audio input. So, but apart from that, there isn't really any standard daily routine. Oh, and every day I use Anki for at least 4 sessions of 15 minutes each. I know that's a lot, but that's just me. And what I'm using Anki for is not to remember or to learn anything, but to stop me forgetting, as I've described in a previous video. Now, I'm not advocating these are the approaches that the people should follow. I really believe you should roll your own technique. I'm just saying what I do. So this was a good question. How about learning pronunciation? And in fact, somebody said, why don't you have a native speaker on the audio that you create instead of yourself? Okay, the first thing is, audio is that I create during these sessions isn't for me to listen to passively. The whole point of it is for me to record the unraveling of my curiosity and to create sort of Michel Thomas-like courses, but driven by my own curiosity for me to interact with. This is really the core of the method. Curiosity stimulates my investigation into something so that then I can start to be interactive in that language by asking myself questions and following them up. First in the written form, the play sessions that I talked about, and later on when I'm listening to the audio, I'm not listening passively. I'm actually answering the questions and thinking through it, and sometimes even having new thoughts come up and writing them down to be followed up later. So really, I don't particularly care too much about pronunciation at that point. I'm really interested in having not a passive interaction with the audio, but a very interactive session with the audio. So it gets my mind continually spinning and I'm answering things, if you see what I mean. So the next thing then, why don't I have a native speaker on the audio? It's because I'm producing them just for myself. Maybe if I was producing some kind of professional course to give or sell to other people, I would want some native speaker. But that would take a long time to prepare. And I'm not too concerned about pronunciation, as I said. Here, I study Czech pronunciation just by listening to other people, and now once a week I'm actually taking lessons from a professional. In Czech it's called logopedia. This is the study of speech, and I'm actually taking once a week lessons on trying to improve my accent. But certainly it isn't part of the spiral method. This is something else on the side to it. This is a good question. How long does each iteration take? Now, I said in an earlier video maybe 2 hours is typical, but somebody asked, is 2 to 4 hours a typical range? And the answer to that is actually, it's difficult to say what an iteration is, in a sense that once I've studied one thing, it doesn't finish. I build on it in the next iteration, and the next iteration, and the next iteration. So for example, imagining that I'm studying, as I think I've talked about fractions previously, let's say that. Imagine I learn how to say a half, and I think, oh, how do you say a third? How do you say a quarter? This kind of thing. I'll explore that until I have a sense of satisfaction, and then go around an iteration, and that may take a very short time. I would say 2 hours is pretty typical. But later on, my curiosity about fractions will come back, but in a more sophisticated form. So, ooh, you've talked about fractions there, a quarter and a half, but how about if you're now going to use decimals, 0.35 and things like that? So it builds on the things that I've learned in previous iterations. This is why it's a spiral, continually building up. So even though the single iteration about fractions may have taken 2 hours from start to finish, maybe half an hour for investigation, 15 minutes for play, whatever, it's something like that, and so on. It doesn't mean I'm finished with that subject area. I'll build on it at more and more detailed levels in later iterations. And we'll come to that actually in a short time, because the next question is, what does my Anki deck look like? And this is important because I've seen a lot of people feed lots of information into Anki. And I've seen some people say, delete cards once you're happy with them, once you've read them and remembered them. But mine don't work like that. As I've described, mine is really a repository for notes that I create. And as my understanding of something increases, my notes evolve. So I don't put a word into Anki or a phrase into Anki, and then that's it. And then I study that phrase over a certain time period and then eventually delete it. No, as I learn more about something, I add more information to it. Now, I felt a bit uncomfortable at first with showing people my Anki deck because I don't want anybody to think that they should copy what my deck looks like. Not at all. I think it's very important, as I've said, to follow your own curiosity and to build on what you already know. And so notes that are necessary for you would be completely different from notes that are useful to me. So with some hesitation, I'll find my iPad, and open up Anki and show you a couple of cards on. So here's something I'm studying was studying this morning, in fact. Whoops. I'll just lock this. Okay, so I hope you can see this. This is the word jej in Czech, which is a very fancy way of saying who or which. So that is the man who da 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 da, or that is the car which da 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 da. So in this case, my Anki card is simply a grammatical card. It tells me the declensions of jej. This is the full declension of the masculine animate plural formal jej. And here I have notes saying it's a fancier way of saying kteří, which is an alternative word, and the initial J becomes an N after prepositions. So that probably doesn't mean very much to you, but these are notes that are helpful to me. Now, if I move on to another word, jej, it's the same word for something which has neuter gender, and this is in the singular. And here we can see that it's very similar. It's got all the declensions, it's got the full declension, but in this case, because I was a bit unfamiliar with it, I've got loads of examples, and it's got notes above them saying things like, if it's at the head of a relative clause, it becomes jehoj, and so on. And each example follows the reading style that I talked about in my literal translations video, where it has English in grey followed by Czech in blue in each sentence. So I read, if you saw that video, the English part silently and the Czech part out loud, so that I understand meaning from English but get structure from Czech. So as time goes on, these cards would have just, in fact, there's a series of cards here which actually at one point just started out with one word, jej, because I'd seen it somewhere and I knew it sort of meant which. And, oh, that's interesting, I'll use that instead of which. And then I realized it had a whole declension. So I put that in, and then I saw some examples, and then I realized it was a fancy way of saying kteří, and then so on. So over time, I add notes to this. The cards evolve over time. So, sorry for this interruption to the series of explaining the methods, but I just wanted to answer these questions for people who had sent me questions, and I hope those answers were satisfactory. And as I get more questions, I'll make more videos. And hopefully in the next few days I'll be able to make the proper part 3 of explaining this method of mine. Thank you.